afternoon to all who have tuned into this ESOF session. This is a session that is about the voice of early career researchers on research culture. And all of our four speakers are travel grantees who were initially offered travel grants to come to Trieste, and three of whom are now participating virtually and one physically at the event here, ESOF, this conference which we're all very passionate about, which shares science with society and with other scientists and really generates a lot of discussion. This session will introduce the four researchers that volunteered to speak today. First, we will speak with Alexander Cruz. He's a PhD candidate at KU Leuven from the Philippines, and he was offered a travel grant by FVO. That's the research funder in Flanders. Secondly, Catherine Meyer will speak, and she's a PhD candidate from Luxembourg, studying at the University of Hohenheim in Germany, and she has been offered a travel grant by the FNR from Luxembourg. And our third speaker is Chloe Delkens, who is a graduate of the University of Hasselt, and she's currently seeking a PhD position, and she was offered a travel grant by FWO in Flanders. And our final is Dr. Ibon Santiago, who's a Humboldt Fellow at the Technical University of Munich, and he was offered a travel grant by the Wilhelm and Else Herreys Stiftung. So I would like to ask our first speaker, who is Alexander Cruz, to introduce himself, and we will hear about his research and his general interests.
Before I could give my personal stance on the research culture, it's important that I introduce myself and my background and where I'm coming from on tackling these insights on the research culture. So, as introduced by Brian, I'm from the Philippines, and I'm currently doing my PhD at KU Leuven in Belgium. Before that, I studied at the University of the Philippines and the National University of Singapore, and my specialization is on material science and engineering, with special focus on nanoelectronics and chemical engineering. So I study at the KU Leuven, and I also work partly at IMEC, which is one of the world's leading nanoelectronics research center, where we work on semiconductor research and different applications such as biomedical devices, AI, information technology, what have you. And as I've said, I was working on the chemistry part, material science part. So I'm mostly interested on new materials for applications in electronic devices. So, and the special flavor of this research is I also work inside a clean room where I kind of integrate this porous materials in clean room compatible systems for applications in the semiconductor industry. I've been doing my PhD for about 4 years now, so I'm about to finish. And before that, I actually also worked as a junior scientist at the Solar Energy Research Institute of Singapore, where I worked on the end-to-end manufacturing of solar research-grade solar cells. So I was mostly interested on developing novel material pastes for the metallization of research-grade solar cells. And also, I had some industry experience. I worked at the refinery as process engineer and benchmarking manager for about 2 years. So there, I was acquainted with the process engineering part of the oil and gas sector. So that's quite varied, and I did a lot of multiple things. And having said this, with all of these experiences in different countries and in different industries, I kind of have this three, major stance on research culture. So before that, I would like to just summarize quickly my research profile. So I'm interested in chemical engineering, nanotechnology, and also the business side of things, the industrial side of things. And as I've said earlier, so these are the three kind of main points that I want to kind of raise in this very important opportunity to voice out my insights on the research culture as an early career researcher. First is truly open science. Is it realistic? Second is science communication, diversity, and inclusion. And I think the most important, at least for me, is the opportunities and support after postgraduate education. And maybe just a quick run through of each of the point. First is truly open science. So before, we always hear publish or perish culture in research. But now, like, it's becoming more and more publish and perish. Like, we publish but perish anyway. What I see is that indeed high impact publication record is very important because it's easy to measure, but it doesn't give a full picture of our scientific rigor, and it does not fully describe the contributions of our research to the society. And over the past 4 years of research experience as a PhD student, I was kind of realizing that there are different practices where we could kind of expound on this more, such as assessing responsible research practices, merits for accurate and transparent reporting of research methods, and of course, equally important are the scholarly activities such as outreach, mentoring, knowledge exchange, and most of the time, these are not captured on RH indices and Google Scholar profile, and recruiters from the industry or even for postgraduate research hardly ever care. Second of all is science communication and diversity and inclusion. So from a personal stance, I truly believe that technology is available to cater to the world's most pressing challenges, but making it available for the masses is another side of the story. And I have seen, at least in the very brief research experience I've had at the universities, that research communication skills are as important as our technical knowledge. And to be able to do that, we have to have access to platforms to channel scientific dissemination. And diversity and inclusion comes into play when this is introduced to open the barriers existing between the technical know-how and the soft skills. And D&I also opens up ourselves to whole new insights. And third of all is opportunities and support after postgraduate education. So uncertainty, this is probably embedded to our DNA already as early career researchers. But it's not something that we could not address. And there are a lot of things that we could do about this, such as incentivization for early career researchers, such as support to join networking activities such as ESOP. So thank you very much for the support to join this. This is one example. Second is end-to-end support, meaning the universities, especially in recruiting foreigners like me, invest a lot to bring us here. But after we get out of the university, the support is not as intense. So I firmly believe that equalization of this support is somewhat necessary, such as placement in industry or opportunities for postdoctoral positions, and of course, legislation-backed measures to ensure seamless absorption of talent from the R&D training pool. Specifically speaking, for example, in Belgium, after we finish our PhD contract, that's it. We have to leave the country unless we find a position. In some other countries, such as the Netherlands or France or Germany, there's like this 6-month grace period for you to find a job or to kind of further your soft skills to be able to be absorbed in the industry. So I hope we can talk about this more later in the Q&A. And to summarize my insights, truly open science to promote a healthy research culture, science communication as an instrument of R&D accessibility, and across the board support is enabling for young researchers like me. So once again, this is Alexander, early career researcher, and this is my voice on research culture. Thank you.
So thanks very much, Alexander, for that very nice talk. And I would now like to ask Catherine Meyer from the University of Hohenheim to make a short introduction of herself and her research.
Okay, hello, good afternoon also from my side. So I'm Katrin Meyer and I'm a doctoral student at the University of Hohenheim in Stuttgart, Germany. And yeah, unfortunately, due to COVID, I couldn't travel to TST, but I'm participating with a travel grant from the National Research Fund Luxembourg. My presentation goes a little bit different than Alex's. I want to give first a little bit of educational background. So I'm born and raised in Luxembourg, and after finishing school there, I studied at EG Zurich, specializing in molecular plant biology. However, even though it was very interesting, I saw that it was not quite what I wanted to do in the rest of my work life. So that's why I decided to do a second master at the University of Hohenheim in agricultural sciences. So when I had my master in the pocket, what now was the big questions. For me, it was always clear, yes, to PhD, but my search was not easy. It was not easy because I'm a very picky person, first of all, and second, I always wanted to do something where I'm passionate about. So first, I worked as a research assistant and office assistant, so which is the fancy word for secretary, in the Institute for Agronomy in the Tropics and Subtropics at the University of Hohenheim, which is also the institute where I did my master thesis. And as you can see, it's a very international institute, so with many students coming from abroad, so mainly Asia and Africa, which are our main partner regions. And during this time, I also got insight into first the administrational work of the university and also into project financial management. But I also, what was actually the main part of my job was actually to support my international colleagues. So with dealing with administrations, language barriers by translating letters from bank, governmental organizations, and so on. But I also had the opportunity to go with one of our projects to East Africa to assist the doctoral student there in her fieldwork. So I worked there for some time, applying for PhD positions. However, it never worked out. So I got very frustrated at some point, and I simply came to the conclusion that I myself need to be more aggressively active. And I applied with my very own project for the AFR PhD grant, which is offered by the Fonds National de la Recherche in Luxembourg. And to my biggest delight, I got it. And yeah, before I go more into detail, what I do with my PhD for my PhD project, which is a very big passion of mine, I want to give a short view into what my research interests are, because it's like the basis of this. And my research interest is mostly underutilized and underdeveloped crops. So they use by humankind their production systems and the optimization of the cropping systems of their cropping in a sustainable way, and also in a way to help smallholders in tropical countries mainly. This already started during my study in Zurich, but it was fortified during my master thesis in Hohenheim, which I did on fiber banana in the Philippines, and I also could travel there to do my data collection. And fiber banana is actually a very nice example to explain why I find underdeveloped crops so fascinating, because fiber banana is grown by smallholders, and the fibers are gained through a very laborious multi-step process from the banana stem. And at the end, it is used to produce something we all know, which is tea bag paper. So actually something we know very well, but its origin, so its primary product, is completely unknown. So now with this tiny detour, small introduction into what I'm doing now, so my PhD project. So I'm working on the oilseed palm Acrocomia coleata, and the project is funded by the National Research Fund Luxembourg, and it is a collaboration of the University of Hohenheim and the Universidade Federal de Viçosa in Brazil. And the focus of this project is how inflorescence traits of this oilseed palm are influenced by climate, in particular drought events. So why this kind of project? So Acocomia, as already said, is an oilseed palm. So the fruits can be used to win oil. And vegetable oils are one of the most important commodities nowadays with a rapidly increasing demand. And most of this demand is covered by oil from oil palm. And we all know the issues which rose in recent years regarding plantations and the use of oil palm. So, which is also caused often by the fact that oil palm growing areas are restricted to the humid tropics, so to lands with rainforest. And the problem is that oil palm is not tolerant to drought. And we think that Acrocomia coleata could be an alternative as it has comparable yields and oil composition, but has the advantage that it is drought tolerant and actually based on its climate requirements cannot be grown in the humid tropics. So Acrocomia could be an oil plant used to reduce the production pressure on oil palm and to expand the growing area of oilseed palms into the semi-arid regions of tropics and subtropics. So I'm now in my second year, and as I said, we collaborate with a university in Brazil, and I also stayed there from March 2019 to March 2020. So the picture shows the field where I'm working is actually coffee growing region, not so much palm growing region, but very beautiful. And so my return was on the weekend where most countries went into lockdown here. And during that time, I was in Luxembourg and with my family. And at the beginning of the lockdown, I thought, yeah, no, COVID-19, it will not majorly affect my work. However, when the situation got very dire in Brazil, it got clear that I will miss my flowering season this year, which will start in around now in 2 weeks. So yeah, I should be preparing myself to travel to Brazil. But I needed to postpone actually my second data collection to next year. And so I will have a delay of at least 1 year in my project now. So that's so far all from my side. Thanks for listening. I'm very happy to participate in this discussion, and I'm also looking very forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine, for the insight into your research background and your career background. I would now like to ask Chloe Delkins to speak.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to present on this lovely evening on the EASE of 2020, and the fact that I can present here tonight on this extraordinary EASE of 2020 conference is due to the many effort and work a lot of members, including Brian, put into this event and this session. So many thank you for you. And also due to the travel grant I received from FWO. So I will present myself a bit. I always had the interest in the human body and its complex functioning, which instigated me to start my studies in the biomedical science with a major in the molecular mechanisms in health and disease at the University of Hasselt. I did many research. I gained many experience throughout the years of studying, and this was including at the laboratories of the U Hasselt during my many internships, but also outside of the school. And therefore, I did volunteering work at the hospital for cardiovascular research, but I also wanted to have more related to the scientific fields in the research and quality control laboratory of GEOS, even during my student jobs. For achieving more, I also went to a Britain colony, Malta, for improving my English and even achieved a certificate in English. But moreover, to improve this all, I wanted to translate my expertise and my knowledge to improve the the human health. And therefore, this gained me to go into a research in which I wanted to go into the MS disease as part of the immunology and infection research group by investigating the influence of sustained uptake of myelin on the migration properties of macrophages. After this, I decided to go on Erasmus to Manchester and joined a very known cardiovascular researcher, which are David Eisner and Andrew Trafford, to join their research team and get more knowledge and elucidate the interplay between messenger and microRNA and the beta-adrenergic signaling in heart failure. And therefore, I went into the pathway of the cascade of the beta-adrenergic signaling, in which many different regulators play a different role. And the major one was protein kinase A, which had a major effector role on the one side on the lusitropic and ionotropic effects of the heart. And due to their phosphorylation, it was responsible for the systolic calcium regulation and the cardiovascular contraction. But on the other side, the phosphorylation on the contractile myofilaments had a major impact on the myocardial relaxation. So I went in depth into the changes in this beta-adrenergic cascade, which were seen in heart failure, but also in heart failure recovery and treatment with tadalafil. Finally, I went deeper during my eight-month senior internship, in which I wanted to elucidate the potential of dental stem cells as therapeutic vehicles in suicide gene therapy to combat oral squamous cell carcinoma of oral cancer. And therefore, I had three major goals during my whole research by elucidating the gap junction formation between the stem cell and the OSCC cells, but I also wanted to analyze the optimal concentration and the optimal exposure duration to 4-QO, which is responsible for OSCC development. And I also wanted to go deeper and make a human dental pulp stem cell line that was expressing the suicide gene. However, during this project, there was COVID-19, which played a major impact during my senior internship. And I had to early cancel my research. However, we could continue with online resources, and I succeeded in finishing my master's degree. I'm also determined to pursue my research career as a PhD student, but due to this whole epidemic, there are it's less easy to continue, which I know by now, and I'm also like a bit uncertain about the future and the opportunities that are still in 2020 as a PhD student as looking for a job. Besides my career as my studies, I also have other interests and hobby, of course. I wanted to stay involved with irrational students and joined the board members of the Erasmus Student Network to also give other students this unique opportunity in their life. I have my hobbies besides like kickboxing and traveling. If there are any more questions, suggestions, you can always contact me or send it in the chat below. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Chloe, for explaining your background. I would now like to ask the final speaker of our 4 travel grantees to speak, and that is Ibon Santiago.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. A warm welcome from Trieste to all those online participants. And thanks to ESOF and Thanks to Brian for organizing this. So my name is Yvonne. I'm a TUM in Munich. I'm a postdoctoral researcher. And I would like to give you first a little bit of my background, so where I'm coming from and what I've done. So I come from the Basque Country in Spain, from this part of the world. I show there a small picture of San Juan de Gaztelugatxe, which is where I grew up, near there. Yeah. So in Basque, we say there's a motto that says "Jalgi adi mundura," which means "Go forth in the world," and that's a little bit what I have done during my career. So I'm a physicist. I studied physics at the University of the Basque Country, and my first research experience outside was at CERN. This was a very nice opportunity where I got to know, European science at its best. It was a great chance to meet other students from all over the world and participate in a project like the LHC. From there, I jumped to MIT, where I did my master's in physics, working in cold atom physics. But for my PhD, I decided to find something at the interface between physics and biology. And my physics in PhD in Oxford was a biophysics research, which after postdoctoral stay in Cambridge, at the moment at TUM, I'm pursuing Humboldt Fellowship on these topics of biological physics and DNA nanotechnology. So this journey from the Basque Coast to the heart of Bavaria, it's also a scientific journey from the subatomic particles to something bigger, like an artificial cell. So a little bit about what research I did at CERN was to study the stability of the proton beam, then became part of the LHC. At MIT, at the Center for Ultra Cold Atoms, we built a lab from scratch to, as I show there in the picture, to study ultra cold atoms, what happens to matter when we cool it down to almost 0 Kelvin. So from there on, at the moment, I'm currently interested in active matter physics and DNA nanotechnology. So the possibility of using DNA as a building block of matter. And that's my current research, that is to study the physics of biological systems, but biological systems that we can make in the labs, synthetic biological systems. So just briefly, I want to give you a glimpse of what this DNA nanotechnology means. Actually, DNA is a fascinating molecule with which to work. We know it contains a lot of important genetic information, but from a physical, chemical point of view, it also contains information about how, about the spatial information, how these molecules come together following certain rules. So actually there's a funny and interesting technique called the DNA origami, which I use in the lab. Using long strands of DNA, we can program the self-assembly of little nanostructures that look like those smiley faces or more complex 3D structures. So this is DNA origami, and one can use DNA, and I use it to attach it to different particles, for example, these nanoparticles that I show there, and one can control bottom up, like how matter organizes itself. So both at the micro and nano scale. So just apart from this aspect of DNA nanotechnology, I wanted to just mention what I mean by active matter physics. So what is active? Living organisms are active, but we also have synthetic systems. Any particle that uses energy either in the environment or internally stored and is capable of producing work, that is moving around, these are active systems, right? So why is this interesting? Well, I'm really interested in these type of systems. First of all, because it can give you a lot of new physics. Like what happens when these particles, are moving around? What new laws of physics can we find there? What collective phenomena do they form, right? Not only that, these type of systems can also be useful. They can be applied to move things around at the nanoscale. So functional nanotechnology applications to control the motion of small systems. Right? And finally, I'm interested in using all these systems to create synthetic biological systems, such as an artificial cell that is capable of mimicking processes that we find in life. So that's briefly my research background. And of course, if you're interested, please touch. I wanted to thank my funding organization and of course ESOF and Brian and all your panelists. I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much to Yvonne and to all of the other speakers for their contributions. What we will do now is that we have prepared questions by a co-design with all of the researchers who are awarded travel grants by the various funding organizations. So the funding organizations were the University of Zurich, the Research Foundation Flanders, the Center for Dialogue at Campus Riedberg, Vetenskapsrådet, that's the Swedish Research Council, the Wilhelm and Else Reyes Stiftung, and the Luxembourg National Research Fund. And they all kindly funded researchers to take part initially physically, but now virtually, many of them, although some few have come to Trieste. And I approached as many of the researchers as I could, and I asked them to give input about what is important to them in their research careers and at the present moment. And I got a lot of feedback from our researchers, and from that we prepared some questions for discussion. But if anybody in the audience has anything they want to ask, please feel very free, and you're very welcome to send any question you may want to ask to us. My first question for all of the participants is, what is your dream career? Do you aim to make an academic career or one of the private sector? And how are you preparing yourself through your research and through your training to make a career in future? So I would like to start with Alex, please.
Thanks, Brian. So to answer your question, I'm actually looking right now for jobs, and I wanted to stay on the R&D sector, but more like hybrid with the industry. So that's not necessarily mean that I don't want to work in academia, but if I will take on a project, it is something that is directly translatable to commercialization or much very close to the actual applications. And I'm glad that you asked that, because right now I also want to voice out the challenges that probably is experienced by a lot of people who are looking for opportunities after their master or PhD, that it's kind of challenging at the moment. So not just because of the job market plunging down because of COVID-19, but there are also some let's say intrinsic challenges already in place in the system, especially for who have similar situations like me, who is a non-EU citizen and also is not speaking the local language. So what I see in the current job market situation is that they kind of require most of their employees to speak the local language, even if at plain sight, it's actually not required or not necessary, because all the information exchanged are in the English language. And that puts those requirements put people like me 2 steps behind my peers. So that is currently the challenge that I'm kind of facing right now. And to augment those challenges in the meantime, I'm currently learning Dutch and also trying to approach the job market in a different way, such as asking connections and friends of friends instead of applying via the normal recruiter route. So In summary, I'm looking for an R&D position, and these are the challenges I'm facing right now. And I hope to address them as soon as possible.
That's very interesting, because we had a session this morning about transferable skills, and my colleague on the EuroScience governing board, Teresa Fernanda Safra, mentioned that she learned Swedish after she finished her PhD, and then she got the job out of it. So I think this is something that maybe among researchers or PhD candidates, that very often language learning is not a priority for them or for the institutions, but is very important when you enter the job search. And
Exactly.
I've seen this many times.
Yeah.
And now I would like to go to Catherine, if she could tell us about her dream career, or how she figures she will get there.
Yeah, so as I already mentioned, I like to work with underdeveloped crops, which is mainly not only fiber bananas, but can also be superfoods. So those are plants which are not grown in huge amounts, but which are sought after by the industry. And actually, I would like to work as a project manager to work with farmers cooperatives to actually grow these crops, and to help them to make like kind of a relationship with the industry, so they produce high quality crops which go to the industry, and on the other hand, the industry supports them. There are already projects like this, especially in the organic industry, so organic food and cosmetics industry, and I would really like to go in this direction, because it would be still enable me to travel while working, and to have these kind of relationships with smallholders and so on and so on. With that, I already answered that I probably will go more into the private sector than stay in the academic career. Also because it's with academic career, even though it gives me more freedoms in arranging my work-life balance, I have major problems with the employment politics they have, because I don't want to be on end on temporary employment and always chasing new funding for my salary, and actually neither being able to build up a kind of living. So like having like a settlement where I can go, and on the other hand, not being able to pursue my passion, which is working in the field and working with people. And that is, I think, kind of sad. So that is, one of the points where I think that I would go into the private sector, but it's depending on what job opportunities I get when I'm finished in a few years.
So thanks very much. It seems that you're very interested in dealing with multiple stakeholders internationally, and also in something with great societal impact. So Chloe, can you tell us about your plans for the future? You dealt with already to some extent in your presentation, but you can say something about your dream career, maybe now, but also maybe you said you wanted to find a PhD position, but even after your PhD position, it's a long time to go. But you can tell us and the audience how you feel.
Yes, absolutely. So at the moment, I want to use my expertise and my knowledge to more work. So continue my research more fundamental, to some extent on the research I already done and in the fields that really interests me. So I worked around the tissue regeneration and the use of cancer cells, stem cells, cancer research, and applications of applications of the stem cells in cardiovascular science. That were topics that I already worked around. So this definitely interested me because I choose these topics because I was already interested in it, and definitely it accelerated during the research and during the whole internship periods. But I also are open to use the expertise and the things that I learned in these things on other topics, like using the tissue regeneration of the use of stem cells in neuroscience. That was not a topic that I already worked on, but that is definitely like that are also things that interest me and didn't came in my path until now. So both the things I worked on and still open things are the topics that I'm looking for into my future career as a PhD student, and thereby I want to gain like the fundamental knowledge to expand that knowledge, but also contribute to a real relevance, a social relevance, and contribute to the effective therapy to actually gain towards the therapy to treat the affected patients and really have a value to the social social relevance of the therapy.
Thanks very much, Chloe. I will now ask Ebon what his career plans are and whether they are in academia or in the private sector.
Yes, so to answer your question about dream career, I think some points have already been touched by the other panelists, but I will highlight 2 points that I consider important for me. So on the one hand, the problem, right? The work that you do, it has to be meaningful. You know, it has to be. I need to be passionate about it, right? So that's one aspect, and the second aspect is the environment. That is the people I work with, right? It has to be an environment that's you know, nurturing, and that you are constantly challenged, that you can learn from others, and you know, I think having that environment, whichever the problem at hand is, that's something that I look for in this dream career that we're discussing. And I'm aware that this is, you know, not only in academia, but beyond academia, you can continue doing science in such an environment as well. So, yeah.
Thanks very much, Ebon. We've had some questions that have come in from the audience. And one first question is, are any of the researchers involved in any organizations like Eurodoc, the Marie Curie Alumni Association, the Young Academy of Europe, Global Young Academy, or others, who are basically working for the researcher's voice? Do they think the organizations mentioned are doing enough to raise their issues? And I know that Chloe said she was involved in the Erasmus Student Network. So I think we know for sure. But if anybody would like to speak, because I know that there are organizations, but very often researchers are not, or the vast majority of researchers are not involved in associations. So if you have anything to say, please put your hand up and I will give you the floor. Yeah, there's Alexander.
Yeah, so I am a member of the International Young Chemist Network, the IYCN, as in the International Liaison Committee. So what we do at the IYCN is we make sure, at least in our department, we make sure that all of the countries, member of the International Union of the Pure and Applied Chemistry, have representatives. And we have this annual events such as the AUPAC Youth Chemist Convention. And what the reason why I joined this organization and kind of voicing out the concerns or the issues faced with the young researchers is mostly about representation. So I joined this committee to make sure that even developing countries like where I'm from, the Philippines, have their representation in the organization, in the events, because let's admit the fact that these countries are the ones that need help in terms of research funding and researcher support. So I'm very glad that there are these channels to facilitate that, at least to start or trigger the resolution of those issues.
That's very good. Does maybe Chloe can say a little bit about her work with ESN?
Yes, indeed, I'm a part of the Erasmus Student Network. So partially we're working on like introducing new people, Erasmus students into a country, that are culture, but also not only involved in like getting to know the culture, but also there are a lot of students that are actually PhD or postdocs that are involved in our committee and our board membership. And we also we're on local, but also national and international levels. And we definitely raise the problems of the COVID-19 pandemic. Even like in both ways, like how does it infect has an influence on the Erasmus students, on the social activity, on their research, but also the research that they do, and how do we have to help them, because a lot of them came here to not only do the studies, or it could also be internships, PhD students that were limited due to the COVID pandemic in their research, that they have to early stop the research, and now what do they have to do? Do they have to stay here? Do they have to go early back to their country? And what do they have to do with the rest of their time where they normally had to do their experiments and write the paper? So we also work on an international level, and we have a platform for this, for cooperating and finding answers on these questions, like how can we help them, what is the best situation, are there opportunities that they can move forward in their research, or is it at the moment the best thing to go back home and finish it on by other equipment, like social, virtually, and not doing the experiments themselves. So it's not only helping them, it's in their cultural sector, but also in the scientific way.
Thanks very much. That is something we probably will come back to later. I would like to go back to kind of one of the questions that came from our travel grantees, and it was about, do you take time out from your research to maintain a healthy work-life balance? And also, I think there was also some questions about kind of work-family balance, but I'd like to start with Katrin.
So yeah, of course, I take time outs from my research because I need it to function. Actually, I'm not someone who can do work on end. I need my sleep. I need to eat. I need this. Otherwise, I'm completely shutting down. So I learned to put in these times where I take breaks. However, as I really love what I do, I keep very irregular working hours. And so it can be that I start sometimes at 11 a.m. and I work until 12 p.m. because simply I'm so into the work that I forget the time. But for the rest, I really try to have anyways a balance. So to meet friends, to cook something nice on the weekend, because otherwise you go crazy. You need to do it. Yeah, because then more or less in the early point you get a breakdown, and that's not something you want. No.
Alex?
Yeah, I take time also to relax, especially the weekends. So since I started my PhD here in Europe, I noticed the culture of having a very good work time, a work-life balance, and which is not something that we advocate a lot back in Asia, at least from my experience. So this is really plus for me. But I'm also happy that there are some activities within the research institute I am affiliated with, such as this is PhD Society, which I'm currently the chair. And I take this opportunity to kind of organize networking events for PhD students in the institute, because I personally believe that outside of this really being fixated with our research, having the chance to network with other researchers from different fields is also very important to broaden our horizons. So yeah, apart from personal activities, I like to really just network and help people find their say ground, to also provide like also this activity so that they could themselves do something outside of their day-to-day research work in the lab.
Very nice. And Iban, do you have work-life balance?
Yes. So, I mean, one of the downsides of academic life is that maybe this line between work and life is a bit blurry sometimes. I think it's a matter of personal preferences. Some people like to, focus a dedicated amount of time on a problem, and then they decompress, right? While others, perhaps with family duties and other priorities, they would like to have this work-life line clearly defined. In my case, I try to keep a balance. Yes, so I mean, where I am right now, for example, in Munich, there are many theaters, concerts, museums that I also like to enjoy, right? And it's also good to get out once in a while and come back to the problem at hand afterwards, right, with a fresh mind. So yeah, that's my approach.
Chloe has already shown us in her presentation that you like doing kickboxing, and what other ways do you have encourage yourself to have a healthy work-life balance and preserve your not only to work on research.
Yeah, during the time that you're home, so there was an early premature cessation of the lab work, so we had to work from home indeed. Then it's like difficult to manage your own day. Like, okay, we're sitting here the whole day. You don't want to work the whole day on your thesis, so you definitely want some breaks in between. So there were like, I also like cycling, running. Fortunately, we had still the opportunity to do that. So my hobbies shifted a little bit from the capabilities that I were during this period. So kickboxing was not an option anymore due to the social distancing. But like, I changed my quality time into running and cycling, and that were then the main breaks I had during the writing of my thesis.
Okay, that's very, very good. I have a short question. Have you ever applied for research funding? And I would start with Iban because we know that he is a Humboldt Fellow, so he can share his experience of that.
Well, my answer to that question, Brian, is yes, I have. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, right? I mean, this travel grant is an example. Or so I think research funding applications is an art, right? And the only way to figure it out is to try it many times, right? So not get discouraged by rejections, and have as many people as possible read your proposals, get some feedback. I think it's good that people outside your field read it. Maybe you can ask your grandma, well, maybe not your grandma, but a close friend that it's not necessarily in your field, give you feedback on these proposals. And the law of large numbers is in your favor, right? I mean, there are many avenues. So yeah, I think the apply and often. Right?
I think the advice to ask somebody from outside your field to read this is very good, because very often the evaluators will not be from directly in your niche of science. So I think to have somebody with a fresher pair of eyes to read this is very good. And then Catherine has also applied for funding for her PhD, and maybe she can share some of her insights.
Yeah, so I applied for my PhD for a grant, which I also got, and also for the travel grant, and I also have students getting funding for their travels abroad, because our master's students are traveling to the tropics for the data collection. But I actually need to agree with Yvonne. So the most important is to give your proposal afterwards to people who don't know your field exactly, so that they can give you feedback. If it is good, if you made it understandable, also people who are not so much into the topic, especially because proposals need to be very short most of the time. So you don't have these kind of pages where you can explain in detail what you want to do, but you need to find a very short way. And I think that's a very good, that's an advice we need to give to give the proposals to as many people as possible to read, and then see what they are saying. Yeah, for the rest, I was very lucky with my applications because they always went through the first time. So rejections, I did not have so much with, with my proposals. But yeah, I think just take it as a trial and error and go for it. You will only learn from it. So, and we are, I mean, everyone in research is depending on writing proposals to get funding. It's the way it is at the moment.
Chloe is the youngest of our participants. Have you applied for funding apart from the travel grant at ESOF?
During my master senior internship, I heard about other researchers and I was working on mine. So I had suggestions to combine different research into a new topic that really interested me. My supervisor was really happy about the idea. So we worked around it. And when we wanted to start for asking for the grant, she just received a really huge grant. So that was lucky, but also unlucky for me, because there was the chances to get a new grant was a little bit limited by that, because there was already a huge amount of money that was actually for another project. So they suggested us to wait for a year and then go for that project. So at the very last minute, we didn't do it. So we didn't even try to do the FWO grant. So that's why I was looking for another project, because I'm not going to sit and wait. That it is a nice opportunity, and if I don't find anything else by that time, we can try it and work that project out. But in the meantime, I will just look further for different other topics that really interest me and look if there is another opportunity to already start in this and apply an FWO on another project.
Very good. And Alexander?
So, contrary to Catherine, I actually had a lot of rejections. And those rejections that I got are primarily on those funding agencies that require really, really high impact publication record. So unfortunately, I didn't have this. I didn't have as many first author publications in Nature and Science. So that was kind of the limiting factor. And some of these funding agencies really explicitly mention that you have to have high impact publication record to be able to get in. So I'm very glad that there are some other agencies who focuses more on your motivation and also the impact of your research. So like I've had some grants from the Cost Association, which were really who were really supportive of young researchers like me to join some networking events. So I'm very successful in that part. So coming from an early stage researcher, I have three main kind of learning points. First, it's very important to have a very good mentor. So your professor is your first, your supervisor, and your senior postdocs are your first teacher on how to write a perfect grant. Second is science communication. So you have to tailor fit your proposal to the audience. So it's important to also know the panel and the funding agency supporting your grant. And third of all, as what the other panelists are, Yvonne, Catherine, and Chloe, just try and try and try. And if you try 10 times, at least one of them should work. And unfortunately, that worked for me, even though I had many heartbreaks in the past.
That's a very, very good point. It is very difficult to judge the value of an earlier career researcher based on conventional metrics such as journal impact factor or even citation index. And I think this is something the evaluation of early career researchers has to stop, but I think there is a lot of movement in that direction, and hopefully in the next years that will come true. I think many of you have talked about being internationally mobile, and I think of all of the researchers, only Chloe is still based in her home country. What are your personal experiences of being internationally mobile, both positive and negative aspects? And I'd like to start with Chloe, because even though she's based in her home country, she has been very active in the Erasmus student network, so she's also internationally mobile.
Yes, so I went through my master's senior internship on Erasmus to England, and that was a huge opportunity and huge gaining for me, because I didn't want to stay at my place at my university working in those labs, and I also wanted to go to bigger companies and other universities to also see how do they work, and getting into a new international group and see how do they manage this. And it was a real opportunity, and I loved it because I got in a great research group with all doctoral students and postdoctoral students that I learned a lot from, just by going every week to the daily the weekly conversations and meetings that they had, just to learn how they did their research, even giving them advice, or even they ask me advice, how do I look at it. And it's not because I'm a master student that I can't be on the same lab, that I can give input. And that was a nice thing about it, because I even could give input and even had real conversations and discussions about some things that give each other more insight in some things, even getting into another laboratory, another city, country, and seeing how they approach things other than your country. So you can only learn about it and see how other great laboratories, even universities that have much more money, how that you get more insight into also the financial side of it. Because mostly when you're working for a professor, you do research, you do the experiments, but you don't have also the knowledge about how does cost this. And if I now start my own research, am I capable of doing all these experiments, and also know from yourself how much cost this, is this relevant? So you think twice about experiments, alternatives, you even make your own alternatives, because I was fully aware of doing my own research and also looking after alternatives if it didn't succeed. So in this way you had other perspectives on things, and you came in other environments that you can learn a lot from. And thereby, for my PhD position, I'm not limited to Belgium. I definitely want to go out. It doesn't have to be for the whole 4 years, but some part of it would be lovely if I could also do this outside my country.
Thanks very much, Chloe. And maybe Katrin can give some of her insights, because you've been, as you said in your presentation, you have a lot of kind of contact with international researchers, both as a research manager and also through your research.
Yes, so for myself, so I'm quite mobile in my research since 6 years. So traveling to Africa, to Asia, and now also many times to Brazil. So one long time and one shorter time before that. It's always times which are kind of exhausting because you need to constantly, you have a very short time frame. So I'm working in the field there, so I'm seasonal bound too. So it's kind of thing because you need to do a lot of work within a very short time frame. However, what you grow immensely as a scientist, because when you're standing in the field and you have a problem, you can't do a big research. You're standing there with the farmer and you can't phone your supervisor because most of the time your supervisor is either 7 hours before you or 7 hours behind you. So he's either asleep or eating with his family. So you're standing there. So you need to learn to trust what you learned, and you learn how to apply it. And that is something which helped me a lot to grow as a scientist and to trust myself and in my knowledge. And it's like the most brutal way to learn because you're just like pushed into the water and either you swim or you drown. So that is like, it's actually a very positive aspect for me. And other positive aspects are, of course, the contact with the people and the cultures and the exchange with other scientists, with other research cultures too, because they are working also a little bit different in these countries than we are doing in Europe. Negative aspects, I had not many, except sometimes the exhaustions, but because I need to say I'm very privileged in having a Luxembourgish passport. It opens doors. When I play by the rules, they can't deny me a visa because the passport and my name already says okay. So but I know that this is a lot of problems, like Alex probably also experienced. It is a lot of problems for my colleagues which are coming from China, Thailand, Africa, that the visa extensions takes a lot of time. They have problems with administrations which are delaying their papers, probably most of the time based on their name, so that they don't get their employment benefits in time, so that we need to phone, like I had this often, that we need to phone the administrations like, please, these people, they need to have their employment benefits, otherwise they can't, they have any more funding to live, no? And they are allowed to get it because they had a working contract, so they paid their security, social security, and so on and so on. And I think there we still need to rethink, or institutions, also universities, and need to rethink their behavior also, because we support our PhD students coming from abroad, or also master students, in a lot, and it takes a lot of our time, or the time of our secretary, let's say like this. But there is not coming much from the university itself, or from also from other institutes, that the PhD students from outside don't get any kind of support. And then I think living and studying and working in abroad gets quite hard. Yeah.
Thanks very, very, very much. I'd like to go to Alex, and kind of, because I think on this topic, because Alex is the only non-EU citizen among our speakers, but I think from the non-EU citizens among the travel grantees who responded, many raised the questions about, particularly about precarity and, feeling that they would be forced to take the first job that comes along. After the end of their contract, because they don't have a lot of time. And so could you just tell us about your own opinion and your own experience?
Yes. So as I was shared earlier, before I embarked on this PhD, I was already working for an international energy company as process engineer. And I could say that I'm doing quite well in terms of finances. I'm also supporting my single mother and my sister. So it's important for me to only take an opportunity if it's financially reasonable. So fortunately, KU Leuven, the University of Leuven, are very generous for their PhD researchers. So this was one major factor for me, that I will only accept a research position if it could support me and my family. And I think this insight, or this requirement is not uncommon for many of us. So I have heard, during networking sessions, I've heard some experiences from other countries who offer half positions to PhD students, which I think is very challenging because you expect a lot from your researchers. And then to live at, say, 900 euros a month is quite challenging. And you have to bridge it through other employment activities such as teaching and being a teaching assistant or administrative positions in the university. So number one for me is financial reason. And second of all, like the passport powers, as Catherine said. Fortunately for me, I did good in my school days in the Philippines and in Singapore, so that kind of is my passport to come here to Europe. But it was, of course, difficult for those students who are passionate about their research but didn't have enough credentials to be able to make it to prestigious institutions in the US and Europe. So that's really also one of the negative things that we kind of have to rethink, that that the concept of meritocracy should be more pronounced in academia and in the research sector rather than where they are from and what administrative hindrances are we will be facing, because some of the employers actually say they really have their questions in their forms. Do you have the legal right to work in the European Union? And once you click no, you're immediately out of the pool. So that's one of the things that we should rethink. And on the positive side, I can only say I'm really, really happy with my experience. This gave me the confidence and also the insights and discussing with other researchers and also the support and the friendship. More importantly, the connections that I still have right now. So it's very, very, very nice to go abroad and live here. So
thanks very much. That Ibon already told us about his extensive international research travels between Europe and also to America and back into several European countries. How has your experience of international research mobility been?
Well, first of all, I agree with Catherine and Alex that all these bureaucratic immigration issues can be a headache, right? But those things aside, I mean, I think science is mobile and international, and I think going to a different country, a new culture, a new language, new people, new lab, new habits, and other forms, other research cultures, right? Since we're talking about research cultures, that's in my view positive. There are also some downsides. Right? I mean, starting from scratch in a country, right, like new habits, new people, etc. There can be a learning curve. It can be exhausting sometimes, right? So, but as we were mentioning, I think overall it's good. I mean, both the cultural aspect in a new country, right? But also exploring different ways of doing science. I mean, that's very positive. Yeah.
Thanks very much. I think there was a lot of questions about COVID from our travel grantees, and we had a full other session about COVID. But I would just like to ask how COVID has affected your research and if it has made your future career steps more insecure, and or has it given you more time to consider aspects of your research and skills development other than lab work, for example? So I'd like to start with Catherine, whose research has already, she explained, has been extensively affected.
Yeah, so I'm now, I need to postpone now my second data collection, so which I actually need to publish the whole thing because I'm working with climate, so it's good to have a second year, how we call it. But that's now completely postponed to the next year. I hope that I can travel in February for the harvest season of last year. So the palm needs 14 months to produce the fruits. So I hope that this will work. But I spoke already with the FNR, and they can Fortunately, they can give me the option to extend for 1 year and to suspend for 1 year, so that I could gain 2 years, which would completely, with no major other things, would completely cover the time I need. So of course, now I need to look for additional funding for some of the parts, but so I have this actually quite positive aspect. But yeah, let's see how it works. Of course, other things like lab work in Brazil, as also here, are completely delayed too. So because the university in Brazil where I wanted to analyze our 13C and so on is just reopening now slowly. And this is all kinds of stuff, which will now delay everything. But let's see how it will go. I think other people are in the same boat. So, yeah.
And Chloe, you mentioned that that COVID has reduced the number of positions that are open for PhD candidates. I know it's hard to compare with before because you weren't looking for PhD positions, but is that the feedback you're getting from universities and from supervisors at universities?
No, yeah, indeed. Like in the beginning, I was already like kind of early by looking at it. Like in January, there were a lot of positions, so I was still quite optimal about it. Like, okay, I'm just going to look in project that really interest me, that I'm looking forward to work 4 years on. And then, during the pandemic, I saw in June and in March even that the amount of positions they were more limited. A lot of people withdraw their their position. So it is quite nervous at the moment. Like, is there still a lot available, or do they want to postpone all the positions a year because due to the virus and the pandemic? I also saw that a lot, that they were looking for a PhD and a postdoc. They were just limited to postdocs at the moment. So is there also like a bit of concern that the researchers of 2020 are less capable or doing things? I hope not, because it is not due to this pandemic when nobody had an influence on that were less than other researchers. So I hope that there will still come a lot of new open applications, that also the researchers of this year get the same opportunities that other years were available, and not due to this pandemic that they have another view on the researchers of this year. But I definitely saw that the amount of applications and the possibilities were more limited due to this pandemic.
And maybe Ebon can comment on how COVID has affected your research, or?
Yes, so COVID totally transformed the city, and including the university in Munich. So first of all students had to go home and have lectures online. However, those doing research, so we could still at some point go to the lab, obeying certain shifts, and there's this number of people that can be in the building at the same time, etc. Right? This was not the case during the lockdown, right? But in later months. So we moved everything online, including group meetings and discussions. And I mean, at least for me, it gave me time to analyze data, write papers, and plan, for the future. So to answer your questions, yes, I mean, COVID has and is transforming academic life and research life, right? Regarding my research, I got particularly interested in the diagnostics tools of COVID-19 during these lockdown months. So I focused on those aspects for some time. And I hope that we can go back to normality soon. But the reality is that the campus is empty. everybody is at home. Yeah.
And maybe Alex can share his experience with us.
All right, so I think much have been said about how COVID-19 impacted our research life. So I just have three sentiments as like a final closure for the COVID-19 question. So first of all, I'm looking for a job. So if there's anyone watching in who has opportunities for my profile, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Second of all, I think we have to rethink our resiliency in terms of tackling this pandemic. Some students could have introduced modeling part in their research to kind of bridge the gap in the times they're not in the lab. So fortunately for me, I have all the data sets to write my PhD. And last of all, and most importantly, is our mental health and our health in general. So we have to be really prioritizing this over any other thing, such as research results, because if we cannot function, then our output will also suffer. So mental health is as important as our physical health and as our research. So once you've taken care of yourself, do not forget to take care of other people too.
Thanks very much. We are now down to our last 7 minutes. So I had some other questions about open science and science communication that I didn't get around to. But I would like to ask each one of you if you have any suggestions on improving research culture. And I would like to ask Katrin first.
Yeah, I wrote up a few, but I will keep it short because we're running out of time and I also want to give the others a word. For me, and I think Alex already spoke about it, so it's like, I think research culture should go back to that quality is the key and not quantity. So because researchers are measured by numbers and impact factors on more publishing, more publishing, but I think it's actually counterproductive in some ways because there will be a bias in it. So there's a lot of pressure on scientists to always get out new data, new ideas, now innovations, and without, I think, sometimes taking all out of what they already found. Of course, it also shows, as a woman, I don't have children, but I know that it actually throws behind a lot of women, especially when they want to have a family or have children, or even like single parents, independent if they are male or female. Because at some point, you can't publish more because your research is going slower, so and your career is also going slower, and I think they are in a disadvantage in this all. And for me, it's also not really a surprise that there are so many dubious journals without a proper peer review, because it makes simply easier to publish, and when only numbers count but not quality, then of course publishing in these journals where it's like easy getting out the stuff is key in this kind of culture.
Thanks.
It's like the main point.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Now I'd like to move on to Alex and see what his suggestions are.
For me, apart from quality, personally, it all just boils to one word: kindness. This is the kind of research leader who I want to be, and I really admire those researchers who are more experienced than I am, who are empathic, able to put in their shoes on your shoes as an early career researcher. So I'm very fortunate to be working for a professor who is very down to earth. And from an early stage researcher, just be kind, and that's not that hard.
Thanks very much, Alex. And now maybe Ibon could share his recommendations for the research world and on how to improve research culture.
Yes, well, I agree with the points raised. I would just finish with about what I think could improve research culture. I will focus on communication. So the little anecdote is that when I first arrived at CERN, a friend showed me the most important building at CERN, which is the cafeteria. You know, it is in a cafeteria where the researchers come together from different departments, different disciplines, and that's where the most important discoveries are made, right? So to find the time and place for researchers to share and communicate discoveries, I think if every institution could have an analog of the CERN Cafe, that would be great.
Thanks very much. And now, Chloe, we'll get the last word on research culture.
I agree with Yvonne that communication is a very, very important role in finding new discoveries. And as I saw in already other sessions during this Age of 2020, is that open science is also really important. If people would just are willing to share what they found, and even negative results, with both positive and negative results, that this would be beneficial for everyone and all the researchers, because it would improve the fluency of the research, and it would make it possible to discover much more in a shorter time and better results, and evaluate more if we could just share with each other everything that we know, and not only basing on publishing in high papers and only the positive results, but looking at both, and thereby gaining more to all of us.
So thanks very much to all of our speakers, and to all of the other travel grantees who were so generous in giving feedback and in co-creating the issues that we raised today. I would like to thank the EuroScience office for asking me to do this, because it was a pleasure to get to know all of you. And hopefully in ESOF in 2 years' time that we will all get to meet in person, and that the COVID-19 pandemic will be over. I think this is, and I would also like to thank all of the funding agencies who funded the travel grants, and the ESOF organizers for putting on such an amazing conference in such difficult circumstances. And finally, to thank our audience who have been asking some questions and giving feedback, and thank you, and once again to thank all of our speakers. Thanks very much for putting in so much work to this, and bye-bye, and see you next time.
Bye-bye, and thank you too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right.